Good afternoon, Supriya, and good afternoon, Vikram. Wonderful to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helena.
So, this talk that I have the privilege of hosting today is in the capacity of being a friend of SHRM. SHRM is doing their conference, SHRM Edge, next week on 29th and 30th, and I was commissioned to kind of rope in both of you. You were handpicked to get on this show with us and talk to us a little bit about all things talent, culture, and well-being. Before I go there, quick one line about both of you for our viewers. I've known both of you for a couple of years now. One has been my manager, and I've managed the other one for a little bit, or tried to manage the other one for a little bit. Supriya, I see that wicked laughter there. Both of them deeply passionate about building and creating nurturing organization culture. We will talk a bit about that. Both of them also believe in the power and potential of coaching, executive coaching, which we believe is one of the strongest instruments to bring about a culture shift, both at a personal level and at an organizational level. So once again, thank you. With that, I'm going to get started. My first question to both of you is, given the pandemic we are in, how do you see your own organization culture evolving and shifting? Supriya?
Thanks, Helena. Let me take a minute and talk about what the culture actually stands on. What are our operating principles and beliefs? We believe in a culture of trust. And I know a lot of organizations out there say that. I have been personally responsible for making sure that we sow the seeds of trust. And that is something that has come true for us in these times of crisis, in these times of vast acceleration and en masse moving to digital space where everybody is working from home. So I think that has been a cornerstone, a pillar. So I would say a huge testimony for that. What has also been interesting is that we've been flexible and inclusive, and therefore if we needed to move, I think we've been able to do that very well. So I think that has also been acing technology, believing in innovation, always be ready to change. So I think those are some principles which have helped us stand the test of time and has brought in the much needed resilience that I think is part of also very much our Indian DNA that I take pride in as an Indian. But if I touch upon, it's also left us humbled. Wanting to learn more and know that we don't have perfect solutions for everything, Helena. So I think opening our minds to networking, looking outside for answers, and dealing with this unpredictable uncertainty, and knowing that empathy is a much needed, much more virtue that needs to get institutionalized. Personally, for me, my leadership team, and all our employees across, each one has a story, as Michelle Obama says. I think our job is to go and get that each one of those stories out. So I would say a lot of it has worked, and a lot of it is humble and eagerness to learn more is where it left us.
No, beautiful. As a business leader, it's heartwarming to hear you talk about empathy and trust and psychological safety, which were perhaps words not so used before the pandemic. So Vikram, Supriya gave us a cue and she talked a little bit about the Indian culture. Do you think Piramal Group has stood the test of pandemic in terms of what you believe in?
I think so. I think first of all, as Supriya was mentioning, these tough times are times when your culture and value, whatever you put out there on the boards, get tested. So our case was no different. In fact, our values, there are four of them. It's about knowledge, action, care, and impact. And I think when I look back 4 months ago, our knowledge about the pandemic was tested. So how quickly can we assimilate, reach out, as Supriya mentioned, to those sources who had better knowledge than us about how the situation is going to pan out. We are a global company. So with global facilities in the US, Canada, UK. So I think just the ability to understand what we know and what we don't know. So our knowledge really was enhanced. The whole notion of action, because with knowledge you also have to act. So I was very surprised that we saw leadership spring out of different places, and we realized that leadership is not a level. Leadership is a action verb. It's about people who display leadership. So a lot of action got tested, and there was different forms of action. In the early days, I remember we have a factory in Detroit, and one of our factory managers actually stays on the Canadian side. So just the fact that he could not turn up to work, how do we get him there? What can be done? How do we ensure that the factory runs remotely? Similarly, just managing permits for our factories. We run pharma factories, and the world needs more drugs today than ever before. So you can't just say I will not turn up. So how people have acted, very very bravely for the sake of their patients. So action got tested. But the care part, which I spoke about, again, care, I think it takes many forms. Whether it is free testing for COVID, whether it is financial kind of well-being that got tested. So a lot of elements of care, I think, were both displayed and tested. And of course, impact-wise, I don't think we are out of it yet, but we see earlier, a lot more people are recovering. There was some impact in our plants, but people are recovering, people are getting better. I think even all, maybe even not getting impacted by COVID. I'm just drawing it to, the four values and its impact on the pandemic. So I would say that's how some of our values were both displayed and challenged.
Well, wonderful. And that's what we always talk about when it's about values and behavior, saying if they can stand a test of something at this colossal scale, which is the pandemic, well, then they're truly real. So you said knowledge, action, care, and
Impact.
impact. All right. So thank you for saying that, sharing that, Vikram. My next question to both of you, and Supriya, you could go for it first, is how has your definition of well-being expanded? I know companies have been talking about well-being of their employees for a while now, but that was, tongue-in-cheek, more in the context of bringing the medical bills down. That's clearly changed. So where do you stand on that?
So, one of the things is as organizations, the other thing is we're all human beings working in organizations, no matter how much of technology you infuse. So there are multiple aspects of well-being that, Helena, we've all been brought up with. Let me quickly touch upon that. Physical. I think we have a high amount of awareness around our physical well-being. If you look at the HR policies, the networks, all of that frameworks that we build, they're all around pre-medical, health checkup, when you join, and at the end of the day, you're looking at, making sure there's a preventive health checkup. I think all of that has been so far so good. As focus has been so far so good, I would say, though I believe that personally we can do a lot more on preventive medicine. If you touch upon the financial aspect, I think as culturally we are taught to save. I mean, I know my dad always told me that, 25%, I mean, he said 50%, I kind of took 25% to say, or whatever you earn, you save. And that has held us in good stead. We as a culture of India believe in savings. And I think at these times, if there is a job that goes out, I think we need to rely on savings. So I think as India, we've done fairly well on that. However, my note always is to myself and to everyone is, continue to do prudent investments. It's not something you can say, I've done it. I think it's a continuous journey, be it you're saving for your children, your retirement and so on and so forth. But I want to take this moment and touch upon during our parents' times, the 40, 50 years back or 30 years back, there was no discussion on emotional and psychological well-being. The words as stress, anxiety, depression, a lot of them did not exist. They weren't at least common talk. So I am personally very glad to see that there's a lot more awareness and acceptance of these words. I know particularly, when I got married, I told my husband, well, I get stressed in these situations, so please, this is my time out. And he said, really? So I think I brought stress along with hopefully happiness in the life. But for me, these are words I believe in. I would love to pick up the phone and have someone ask me, because I do that to others all the time. How are you feeling? How are you doing? More than what you've eaten and, what's your temperature? I think these are important times for organizations to come forward and connect at that being level. Like everyone says, each one of us have a story. So I run an organization of Western Digital India with 3,000 people. It is my job to know the 3,000 stories. I cannot say that I can't do this. It is my job, one that I take sincerely, and I'm very committed to it, to say, open up platforms for dialogue, communication. A lot of things can be sorted if we just do that. Share portals, connect sessions where people can come forward and talk about these. So I think just having a dialogue and a mindfulness that this is important too. And overall, I would say all of it, needs to go together, Hadlina. It's not either or. I think wellness and being is coming together of all these 3-4 critical factors. And I think organizations are waking up to that. There are a lot more things coming forward. We have every week wellness and awareness sessions, and we know that a lot of employees are logging in today than perhaps they were logging in a quarter back. So that's my view on this.
No, thank you for sharing. And like I said, it's always nice to have business leaders kind of vociferate, articulate all of this and put it out there for everyone to learn. So Vikram, the wellness is the business you're in. Is there any mind shift there?
First, I was still with Supriya's story. I think she made a very powerful, sometimes in a panel like this, you forget that you're also supposed to speak. So for a minute, I just want to acknowledge the 3,000 stories she spoke about. I think that's really important. And the key question, how are you feeling, and how are you being? I think that sensitivity is needed. I think, to your question, for us, what's happening is, first, it's at a personal level. I find, I was a little personally underestimating the power of physical well-being. The endorphins that you release on a daily basis. It's been a personal wake-up call. My personal story was initially, I actually gained some weight in the first 1 month or so. And then I realized that maybe I was not, exercising as much as one should. And then you step up your game, and I think then it starts to work on you mentally as well. So I think personally for me, it's a story more also about physical well-being, which was a little under neglected. And as an organization, if you ask me, I think we've invested heavily in mental well-being. I think, frankly, if senior leaders are open to listening to millennials, I'm actually in awe of them. The reason I'm in awe of millennials is they just open up to their mental well-being so well. They own it. Whereas some of the senior generations are too macho or too kind of in some other bubble about not accepting their state of mental well-being. So I think if you just stay with the millennials, understand what's going on, what are their sources of connecting, whether with each other or with professional sources of help. So that's what we've done. We just, 65% of our company is millennials. So, we just followed what's the path they take. And that has led us to, working with a lot of counselors. We have global helplines, both in globally and also in the country. We've tied up with psychologists, and now we're beginning to work on, honestly, on data. You'll be surprised how much of data now we have on what kind of calls are going, what are people calling for. Obviously, not the confidential nature of the conversation, but just we know what are the topics on which people are feeling a little concerned. And obviously, it's no surprise that women are more stressed than men, especially in India. It's no surprise that financial well-being is, especially at junior levels, is a big concern. It's no surprise that, at middle management level, there is more stress. It's an insight. We realized that the middle managers today are getting actually charged both from top and bottom. There is more suppressed, stress, you'll be surprised, than the front lines. And that was an insight. So I think once you start connecting with what's happening, then some answers emerge.
I completely hear you, Vikram. And one thing really stood out for me. You started by talking about self-care. It is so important and critical that we first step up to look inside ourselves, especially in the times when we couldn't go outside, figure that piece out, and then begin to talk about wellness overall. Both of you also talked about psychological safety, emotional well-being. It's also at times, I think, bordering on spiritualness, in the sense people need that extra support. And to all our viewers who are listening in, I hope this message is going out loud and clear from a business standpoint, from people's standpoint, Indian company, multinational, which both of you represent, that this is here to stay, and this is time for us to sit up, act, put out the policies, the programs, the budget, the energy and time share, all of that. I'm going to ask you the next question, Vikram. I'll go with you first now, which is one of the cornerstones of the conference coming up next week. One was well-being. We talked a bit about that. The second is talent development. How are you thinking of talent at this moment overall, and specifically development? Is org redesign on your mind? Is re-engineering on your mind? Are you going to invest in learning?
I think it's mostly multi-skilling. What's happening is, like I said, once we've figured that there's a lot of stress in the system, how do you double hack? How do you provide backup for people? Because how do you have time zones which are do not disturb time zones? If you especially want to do some, give some relief to the working women, for example. So we are finding multi-skilling is really the order of the day, and ideally, it's not yet worked for us. But if ideally each one has a backup, I think that will be a source of a lot of reduction in stress. If I know that I have a backup in Harlina who can just back me up, and if I was to take 3 days off, the world won't come shattering down. It'll be a relief for the person, it'll be a relief for the manager, it'll be a relief for the organization. So a lot of cross training and backup for people so that they can actually take some downtime. Today, people are struggling and even scared to take off. So, those are the things that we are trying to look at from a developmental perspective.
No, thank you for sharing that, Vikram. Though the thing that I remember the most is that I could be your backup. So I think you just made me an offer I may not be able to say no to. I'm going to hold you to it one day if it comes to that. So Supriya, a little different kind of a question for you. Ever since the pandemic hit us all, we've all been faced with ambiguous environments. There's been things we haven't really dealt with before. What's been your crucible moment?
Wow. Harlina, before I get there, and this is a very thought-provoking and, kind of takes me into my inner being, I want to take a moment and congratulate Vikram for saying it so beautifully, millennials. I mean, the way they come forward. I think it's fabulous, looking at this cohort of millennials and saying, interacting with them, I get fueled and energized a lot more. So my battery kind of, takes, goes notches higher on that fuel in the tank. I think we need to, continue to engage. And what a great testimony to having so many millennials work in Piramal. Congratulations on that, Vikram. Great job. So thank you for that. Coming to the moment of crucible, Harlina, it's actually about, you asked me one, I had many. All the beliefs, and Vikram said that they got tested, and yet they also left us that what more needs to be done. So there have been many transformative elements. One was we are taught, save for the rainy day, money is there, money can buy you. As also a woman at work, someone who has family to look after, I realize money in the bank, cash at home, does not buy you daily groceries. There were moments I could not put simple, bread and eggs because they just weren't there. It was a lockdown. So I think this coming together of plentiful and scarce in the same continuum, and that continuum being very short, for me, that was like, wow, that's a wake-up call. There is a lot more that one needs to do. So I think for me, that was one. And then understanding how many others are going through where there's not even food on the table, and just complete dose of empathy shot through me. And I was like, wow, it's a sudden wake-up call. I think that was one for sure that I went through. The other is to say that when you look at this overstated freedom of choice, I love the word choice. And I was like, all of us have choice. I've always spoken about it. And especially being a woman in leadership position, I'm like, exercise your choice. When we were incarcerated, our choice was incarcerated. It was taken off the table. We were told, this is what you can do and this is what you cannot do. So I think for me, that was another moment to say, oh my God, now what do we do? So therefore, reprioritizing, prioritizing, getting in conversations with family, yes, but with my teams at work to say, the entire skill of reprioritization came very, very much at the top. This is completely unprecedented new normal. If there are 20 projects we are doing, as business, we can't afford to do. So what's going to get scaled down, scale up, reprioritize? I think that was a moment we were dealing with that. So I think that taught us. A few of the employees kind of moved to it naturally. They know how to do the top 3. And yet a lot many were still doing 10, getting stretched and stressed, as Vikram spoke about. And I think it needed for us to come forward, handhold. And like I said, each one of them have a story to see how we can make them transition from point A to point B. Coach managers to have conversations with employees to say, only these 3 things are important and don't do 10. So I think a lot of communication on that, because suddenly we had 2 full-time jobs. I was a full-time home, caretaker, and I was a full-time, country leader. Well, I think all of us went through that. And I'll take a moment and touch upon the other one, which is life is unpredictable, we were taught. But oh my God, what unpredictability, uncertainty. So living day to day, that was my biggest learning. I always like to put plans. Organizations are looking at 5-year plans. Companies are looking at 100 years. Oh my God, we did not know what 24 hours are and who's going to come to office and make our labs and hardware and everything, on. Can we sustain? I think all of us, were in that stage. And yet 2 beautiful things came through. Family first. For everyone out there, job is a means to an end. The end is family. Family first for me. Second, in crisis, we all unite. We've seen that in the era of independence. We've seen that in the era of COVID-19. We will all come together, get solutions. PPEs are in abundance now. Local startups will come, entrepreneurs will come, corporates will come forward, and we will battle this together. So we as human beings are resilient and we will stand in for each other. So family and humanity are my 2 guiding principles today. A lot more humble, and I would say relearning my principles.
Wow, what a story. Like Jack Welch would say, Supriya, straight from the gut. So yes, this is a litmus test of leadership and leaders like you on resilience and agility, which is what we've been talking about for decades now. Anything you've struggled and battled with, Vikram, and overcome?
I think 2, 3 things. One is being in the here and now. All of us have had our travel plans, holiday plans, everything kind of put on the back burner, even business plans. So I think just galvanizing action towards, and I call it the almost like driving in the rain, right? If you've driven in the fog or the rain, then you can't just see beyond 20 meters. So you keep driving, and then you keep the way keeps getting cleared up. So I think how to just focus on the today, the next week, and maybe the next month, and not worry about the 6 months later. So at best, narrowing the vision to the quarter. I think that has been, a big challenge and also a big learning. So, it's honed in the skill to execute even sharper for the next week, next 10 days, next month, and then the next quarter. And I've actually challenged myself to say no more thinking beyond that, because the moment you start to look at what if scenarios, some of the, stuff does just keeps going off because you don't have all the data sets.
Right.
So I think, yeah, staying in the present.
No, I hear what you're saying, Vikram, and this is what Eckhart Tolle has been talking about in his book, The Power of Now. That's also been my learning, saying minimalistic living, we have enough and more for what we need to be happy, and the now. So yes, thank you for sharing. My last question to both of you, given both of you are coaches yourself and you know how this works, it's a little visualization. So Supriya, same questions for both of you. So Supriya, first one comes to you. This is 1st January 2021. Okay, today is 1st January 2021. What's going to be your New Year resolution now?
I'll go back to what I said before. I will prioritize my family like how? I would always look forward to calling up my mom and saying, I love you. My husband, my kids, my nephews, my nieces. For me, that is not because of COVID. It was sharper focus because of COVID, but they held me strong in these times and they did not let me break. So my is going to be now you are choicefully part of my life. So I think that is one. When I interact with people, a lot more empathy is going to be my driving factor, not as to network all of that, but what is the purpose? As coaches, we are always said, what is your purpose? So my purpose is going to be to connect with the heart, get to know that story. And I'm sure all of us share common threads. Vikram and I just realized we had 3 significant threads. In less than 5 minutes, we were able to get that going. And Harina, thanks to you so much for that. So I would say I'm going to just go with putting those 2 first. Empathy for my team at work, empathy for every human interaction that I'm in. And since I'm responsible for a business, I can't let that hat go away, but a lot more inclusive frameworks that I would personally hold myself and others accountable for. Please don't put people in buses and transport and get them to office when you know that job can be done from home. So ask a few questions. What is the real estate for? What is office for? It's a place for collaboration and interaction. So my senses around these three is what I started with two. I kind of added the third one. Family, definitely making sure there's a lot more inclusive network, and operating through a principle of empathy and getting to know the story of each of those that I come in human contact with. I think Jan 1st, 2021, COVID-free would be, I just added a fourth one, a COVID-free world would be that one. I'm greedy. So that's what
I like the sound of that. I love the sound of that, COVID-free. And you also use this word few times, purpose. It's time for companies to really rethink their purpose. It's time for people to really introspect, reflect, and figure out what is their purpose, and then move on from that. Vikram, a slight variant of the same question. You're 25 years old. With all the knowledge of these years, especially the pandemic, what would you do differently?
Oh, two things. One is gratitude, and my answers for both are similar. One is gratitude. I think there's a lot one can be, grateful for. And I keep saying that these days, if you have three things in 2020, I would repeat that. So good health, live through 2020, don't die, if you can. Certainly food on the table, and a job in your back pocket. So I think these three things. So I would tell my 25-year-old self, hey, you got this, now you run hard and have expressed gratitude. And one more thing in 2021, at the current age, what I would do is I feel honestly there will be a lot of unemployment. A lot of people will lose their jobs, and my resolution will be to find as many jobs for as many people as I can, because one is in that place. So I think as much help to as many people, especially to find jobs and careers.
No, thank you for saying that, Vikram. It truly makes a difference to everyone, and I'm sure our viewers will perhaps take you up on that, and will find smarter ways for you to help a larger group of people. So with that, yes. So with that, I come to the end. Is there any last closing comment or anything on your mind as we bid goodbye to each other for now?
Supriya, please go ahead.
Thanks, Vikram. I would just simply say that, just one point that I couldn't touch upon, do some deep inner work. There is a reason why the entire world went on a pause. And this is coming from a complete coach hat. There is, what do I want? What is important to me? Things change, priorities change. These moments when they come, Socrates said, a life which is not lived with examining it closely is perhaps not lived at all. So I would say examine, what did we learn? What are the things we're going to do different? So this is also the opportunity. I know there are lots on the plate and maybe the time is going to be premium. But if we don't use this time to go deep and learn who we are and what do we want and what's our purpose, perhaps we are always going to look externally. So I would call for everyone to look within and find the purpose for life. Thank you, Ali.
Beautifully said, Supriya. You quoted Socrates. I'll give you another one, which I like. He also said that what you focus on expands. So focus on the right things. So Vikram, last closing comment from you?
I would say focus on, getting out of COVID is so deceptively simple. Actually, it's just three things. And it's so intuitive, so simple that we forget to do it. Just social distancing like we are. I think we still find people huddled over cell phones, watching each other's videos, etc. I don't think we really got it. The concept of social distancing, we understand it, but we don't practice it. Second is masks, and third is hand washing. Actually, honestly, we do these three things, we'll all live through a great 2020 and start enjoying 2021.
Thank you for that. Our Prime Minister Modi taught us those three things, Vikram. You are kind of saying it out aloud again, so I will be sure to do that. So thank you, both of you. Like I said, this was a talk that I hosted on behalf of SHRM, and I'll see you at the conference next week on 29th and 30th July. Have a wonderful weekend, both of you.
Thank you, Alina. Thank you, Vikram.